You know, no one on this planet is more present than a 4-year-old. Little kids, toddlers, are beautifully present. They're in the flow with the present moment pretty much 24/7. And they don't have to go to meditation classes to achieve that state. But they're useless, utterly useless. And I know I've raised two of them. And so what do we do with these beautiful, present little beings? We send them to school, where they can start learning some really valuable life lessons, like how to focus and concentrate and remember what you're doing. And then the all-important question, how are you doing? Oh, you're not doing such a good job. Maybe if you tried harder, you'd do a better job. Ooh, you did try harder. That's a good job. That's a really good capital A. Now what's your next job? Capital B. And if you think about it, that's a path on which you and me and everyone in this society has been reinforced over the years countless times at school, at work, in pretty much every aspect of life. And the results are that we're really productive. We get a lot done. But we're not so good at being present, which is what kids are good at. And so we've traded one for the other when what we really want is both. Hello, my friends. It's James Brown with another Monday Meditations I call Democratizing Flow. And it's because about a week ago, I got a question from someone who watched one of my earlier YouTube videos. And he said, why do you call it flow meditation? And I laughed because there's a lot of reasons that I can give that sound very meditative and describe the type of practice and the consequence of the practice and the flow approach of not trying to manage or curate or control the stream of consciousness, all of that stuff. And all of it's true. But the real reason is because about 7 years ago, I was eavesdropping on a couple of hipster tech bros at a very sort of cool conference called Summit LA that I was teaching a workshop at. So Summit is like a TED Talk combined with Burning Man. Well, elements of Burning Man. It's not that outrageous, but it's a really cool conference. And I was delighted to be able to be teaching some workshops there. And one day I was in between workshops, just kind of hanging out, and my ears perked up because I heard these two guys sitting pretty close to me, and they started talking about flow. And because I was kind of thinking about what I was going to call this new meditation offering I was putting together, and I was thinking a lot about flow and the stream of consciousness and all of those things, I kind of tuned in. And the one guy said, oh man, we were in the Costa Rican jungle. It was a dance circle and it was total flow, with the music and the shaman and nature. And his friend, I assume they were friends. You know how someone can just be waiting on the edge of their seat for you to finish so they can jump in to one-up you? That was this guy. And so he said, oh man, I know exactly what you're talking about, because we were in British Columbia. We were heli skiing. It was virgin powder. And it was, and I quote exactly, he said, flowy flow, 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 flow. And I thought, I almost laughed out loud, but I sat back and I just thought, oh my God, the hell with these guys, right? They're trying to outflow each other, right? These peak experience chasers trying to grab hold of this concept of flow and make people think that it's all about having these big peak experiences like going to Costa Rica and going heli skiing with virgin powder in British Columbia. And look, I want as many peak experiences as the next guy, but I have a wife, I have 2 kids, I have a very large dog, I have a lot of stuff to do. And so, my opportunity to reach out and have these big experiences is pretty limited. And I think that's true for most people. And the other thing I realized is that, being in flow really has nothing to do with having a peak experience. Because I can guarantee you that if either of those 2 guys had been worrying if their partner, girlfriend, wife, whatever, boyfriend maybe, was breaking up with them, they would not have been in a flow state. Right? Because flow, the way I think about it, the way I describe it, the way I teach to it, flow is any experience in which we're engaged in life, and that engagement could be as simple as looking at a sunset or smelling a flower or giving someone a hug when you're not stuck in your mind. And so the way I talk about that is a hug without an agenda can be a moment of flow. A hug with an agenda, not flow. And what I realized is that my life and the lives of most of the people I was teaching And actually, honestly, most of the people in this crazy productivity obsessed, achievement oriented world, their lives would be more improved if they could find ways to simply tune in and be present for all of the small moments in life. Not the kinds of big peak experiences that you would blog about or write about or make YouTube videos about, right? All those little small in between moments. Because if we can experience that more often, if we can simply be more present for more of our life, then that's the recipe for a more enjoyable life. Because flow is, ironically, even though it's an experience in which we're, if we are engaged in something, performing at our best, enjoying ourselves fully, but we're not trying to do those things. So effort, the thing our culture teaches us is of primary importance, is the obstacle of flow. Right? And here's a great example from meditation. I don't know if you've ever taken what's called an MBSR class, management-based stress reduction. I took one several years ago just to see what it was all about. And one of the modules, one of the weeks, they talked about mindful listening. And now look, it's a really good intention to be a better listener, to have better conversations. But after that 2-hour module, a bunch of us went out to eat. And it was honestly one of the most exhausting, frustrating, annoying conversational experiences of my life. Because everyone was just trying so hard to be such a great conversationalist. They were focusing their face off, really leaning in, really making sure that you were done talking completely before offering up something from their end. Look, as I said, it's a great intention to be a good listener, to have a great conversation. But if you're truly going to have a great conversation, you have to let go of the intention. Because if you're holding on to that, if you're trying to have a great conversation, then there's always going to be a part of you that's in between you and the experience that you desire. And that's really what flow meditation is about. I teach a practice in which we allow the mind to flow, in which we don't try to sit rigidly, we don't try to curate the mind, we don't try to have fewer thoughts or nicer thoughts. I'm not teaching people to tune into this chakra or that chakra, right? Not that there's anything wrong with those practices. It's just a different approach. And what I find is that when you can let go of effort and let go of the idea that you're there to accomplish anything or hold on to anything or optimize anything, you're not there to sort of, make sure it's worth the time you're investing. Then the great irony is that the experience can be more easily the kind of experience that you think, finally. As people often say, wow, that was really easy. I went really deep. And I'm like, yeah, and the greatest thing is you weren't trying to go deep. People will say, I experience a moment of silence there. I don't think I was thinking anything there for a moment. Which is weird because my mind thinks all the time. And I'm like, yeah, because you weren't trying to silence your mind. Because, as I said, everyone wants silence in meditation, but the part of you that wants silence, the part of you that's trying to shut your mind up, is the noisiest part of you. And I think one of the most beautiful things that I've seen is that if we can learn how to apply these ideas in meditation, letting go of effort, letting go of control, letting go of the idea that we're there to optimize, to maximize, to get the most out of the experience, then in a very natural, effortless way, we find these ideas at work in other parts of our life, which is why our relationships tend to improve because we're not so controlling of other people, which is why we can just kind of go with the flow, as we like to say, in more of our life when things aren't going the way that we thought they should or wanted them to, which means that we can be available to enjoy what is actually happening without getting caught in frustration and anger and angst that things aren't going the way I planned. Anyway, there's lots of ways in which this openness to what is, as opposed to arguing with what is, will honestly improve your life in so many ways. It's hard to even calculate until you start experiencing it. So that's a little taste of what flow meditation is kind of all about. And it's actually, I hadn't thought about it for a while, but where the name came from. And it came from, trying to trying to seize that word back, take that word back from peak experience chasers to make the idea of flow and the experience of flow more available more of the time for more people. As I said, to democratize the concept, the notion, the experience of flow. Because that's what life is all about. All right. That's it for this week's Monday meditation. What I wish for you in between now and next week is that you are able to enjoy a life of a little more flow and a little less grind. Because as I like to say, maybe the daily grind doesn't have to be. All right. Until then, bye.